Congratulations! You've just woken up as one of history's greatest psychologists. Your outfit? Tweed? Your hair? Questionable. Your brain? A chaotic blend of genius insights and the deeply unsettling realization that everyone, including you, might just be one unresolved childhood trauma away from completely unraveling. Don't panic. That's normal. In fact, that's textbook. Page 1. Welcome to a world where rats press levers, dreams involve far too many staircases, and no one ever answers a question with a straight answer. Because what do you mean by that, really? You're about to build theories, break friendships, and accidentally ruin dinner conversations for the next 100 years, all in a day's work for a mind who dared to ask, why are we like this? Now buckle up, lay back on the couch, and try not to overthink it. Hello, travelers. Histories do not always need to be boring. You can rest here and listen to hilarious histories to drift off to sleep. Tonight, we will explore the topic, your life as the greatest psychologists, and many more. Before we continue, leave a comment to let me know when and where you are listening to this, and hit the subscribe button, but only if you enjoy what I do here. Let's begin with a man who made therapy weird before it was cool. So your name is Sigmund Freud, and it's the late 1800s in Vienna. The city smells faintly of pastries, horse poop, and repressed emotions. You're not just a doctor, you're a thinker, a rebel, a man with a notebook, a mustache, and a burning desire to tell people that all their problems are secretly about their parents, especially their mother. It begins innocently enough. You're studying the mind, trying to figure out why your patients are experiencing hysteria, fainting spells, and nervous breakdowns just from, say, walking into a room with a piano. The cure? Talking. Yes, talking. You invent something radical called the talking cure, where patients lie on a couch and say whatever comes to mind. Spoiler, what comes to mind is never normal. From this, you birth the concept of the unconscious mind, the shadowy, mysterious part of ourselves, where all the spicy thoughts, forgotten memories, and questionable desires go to hide, like a mental junk drawer, only deeper and more emotionally unstable. You break the mind into 3 parts. The ID, your inner caveman, wants cake, wants it now. The ego, the poor soul trying to get the cake without being arrested. The superego, the guilt-ridden voice saying, you don't deserve the cake, repent. And just when people are starting to take you seriously, you unleash your biggest hit, the Oedipus complex, in which you calmly suggest that all little boys want to marry their mother and eliminate their father like a Victorian soap opera with emotional issues. Society stares. You nod seriously. You say it's perfectly natural. Society replies, we're going to need a moment. But you're not done. You analyze dreams looking for symbolism. Staircases, doors, umbrellas. Nothing is safe. You even write the interpretation of dreams and change the world's bedtime forever. Suddenly, people are afraid to dream about fruit. They wake up screaming. Was that a repressed wish or just a banana? You also invent defense mechanisms like repression, denial, projection, the original psychological version of it's not me, it's you. Therapists still use them today, often while denying they use them. But here's the twist. While your ideas become wildly influential, they're also controversial. Some call you a genius. Others call you deeply confused and in need of your own therapy. Your response? A thoughtful puff of your cigar, and the phrase, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, unless it's not. Still, you paved the way. You cracked open the door to the human mind, and then proceeded to kick it down, toss in a chaise lounge, and charge by the hour. But your story doesn't end here, because just when you're building your psychoanalytic empire, a young Swiss protégé walks in with a big brain, big dreams, and a strong urge to make everything mystical. Enter Jung. You are Carl Gustav Jung, and you've just arrived on the psychological scene like a breath of Swiss mountain air, calm, introspective, and slightly haunted. At first, you and Freud are a dream team. He's the father of psychoanalysis. You're the philosophical son. You both believe the mind has hidden depths. You nod along respectfully when Freud says everything is about sex. But secretly, you're thinking, what if it's actually about meaning? You see, where Freud saw the unconscious as a bubbling pit of desires and trauma, you see it more like an ancient library, filled with symbols, myths, and archetypes. Basically the world's most chaotic storybook. And you have a theory? we're not just individuals, we're walking around with the entire history of humanity stashed in our heads. You call it the collective unconscious, a kind of spiritual Dropbox full of universal images, instincts and symbols you didn't download but somehow already know, like the hero, the shadow, the wise old man, and the mother, not your mother, Freud, a universal mother. Please stop looking at me like that. You even invent the concept of archetypes, recurring characters and themes that show up in everything from ancient myths to modern Marvel movies. Yep, you basically psychoanalyze the Avengers 80 years before they existed. But then, you go even deeper. You explore spirituality, dreams, mythology, even alchemy. Not to turn lead into gold, but to understand how people try to transform themselves into more whole versions of who they are. You call this journey individuation, the process of integrating all the parts of yourself, even the weird bits you pretend aren't there, like your fear of commitment or your obsession with horoscopes. And speaking of astrology, yes, you kind of dabble in that too. You look at tarot, mandalas, Eastern philosophy, and anything else that makes traditional scientists clutch their clipboards in concern. Freud watches from afar, horrified, as you begin to say things like, "Dreams are the language of the soul." Freud responds with a letter that can be summarized as "Carl, please stop." Eventually, your bromance ends in psychological divorce. Freud sees you as a mystic lost in myth. You see Freud as a stubborn old man who won't stop blaming everything on people's nether regions. But your work takes on a life of its own. You coin terms we still use today, like introvert and extrovert. You inspire everything from personality tests to yoga retreats. And if you've ever had a dream where you're fighting your own evil twin while riding a golden lion through a labyrinth, you'd probably say, yes, classic shadow work, where Freud taught us how messy the mind is. You showed us it might also be meaningful, that beneath all the neuroses, complexes and archetypes, there's a strange beauty in simply trying to understand ourselves. But just as you're laying out the map of the psyche, another figure appears. He doesn't care for dreams or mythology. He cares about behavior, observable, measurable, no-nonsense behavior. And rats, lots and lots of rats. Enter B.F. Skinner. Welcome to the 20th century, where everything is speeding up. Cars, radios, wars, and the human mind is about to get the most clinical makeover since someone said, maybe emotions are just chemical reactions. Enter Burhus Frederick Skinner, or B.F. Skinner, if you're in a hurry. And trust me, he was. You're not interested in dreams, mothers, or mystical archetypes. You want cold, hard science, observable results. You want a lab coat, a clipboard, and about 50 pigeons. You are a behaviorist, which means you believe psychology should focus only on what can be seen and measured. Feelings, too squishy. Childhood trauma, too foggy. Freud's cigar, still not just a cigar. You believe that humans, like animals, are shaped by their environment. Give the right reward, and you can teach almost anything. Your signature move? The Skinner box, a sleek little chamber where animals learn through operant conditioning. Push a lever, get a treat. Push it wrong, get nothing. It's kind of like Las Vegas, but with more ethics and fewer Elvis impersonators. You discover that behavior is shaped by reinforcement. Positive reinforcement. You get a cookie. Negative reinforcement. You remove something unpleasant, like stopping your little brother's singing when you clean your room. Punishment. No cookie. Possibly more singing. Using this method, you train pigeons to play ping pong, guide missiles, and press buttons like over-caffeinated accountants. No, seriously. You trained missile-guiding pigeons. The military briefly considered it, because in wartime, nothing says precision strike like a bird with a strong work ethic. You also believe free will is kind of an illusion. Behavior isn't a mysterious force, it's cause and effect. You write Beyond Freedom and Dignity, in which you calmly suggest that maybe society would work better if we just engineered better behavior. People don't love that. Humans, it turns out, get twitchy when you call them programmable meat robots. But your impact is undeniable. You change how we think about learning, habits, motivation, and even parenting. Modern apps use variable rewards, one of your inventions to keep us scrolling endlessly. So next time you're stuck on your phone at 2 a.m., you can thank Skinner for turning your brain into a button-happy lab rat. Still, critics argue your theories are too robotic. Where's the soul, the personality, the inner life, to which you'd probably respond, define soul, and I'll measure its behavior in 30 minutes. But fear not, because just as you reduce behavior to buttons and boxes, another figure bursts onto the scene. Someone who believes in potential, in growth, in hugging your inner child, offering it a snack, and asking, "Are you self-actualized yet?" Enter Abraham Maslow. Imagine psychology has been a bit of a bummer lately. Freud says your dreams are just repressed desires. Jung wants you to wrestle your inner shadows. Skinner thinks you're just a glorified lab rat pressing buttons for dopamine pellets. And then comes you, Abraham Maslow, wearing a cardigan of compassion and a smile that says, "You're doing great, sweetie." You don't want to pathologize people. You want to understand what makes them thrive. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with you?" you ask, "What could you become if everything went right?" You believe humans have needs, and not just the pizza and nap kind. Deep, layered needs. So you build the world's most famous triangle that isn't a Dorito, the hierarchy of needs. At the bottom, physiological needs: food, water, sleep. Basically, am I alive? Next up, safety, shelter, stability, freedom from roving tigers and unpaid rent. Then, love and belonging, friends, relationships, hugs, the warm, squishy part of life. After that, esteem, confidence, respect, feeling like you didn't just peak in middle school. And finally, the top of the pyramid, self-actualization, the holy grail of human existence. This is where you unlock your full potential. You write poetry, master Aikido, adopt a rescue llama, and finally start that artisanal jam business you've always dreamed of. But here's the catch. You can't skip the base layers. No one's painting a mural about inner peace while dodging raccoons for dinner. You look at some of the happiest, most fulfilled people and realize they're not special because they're geniuses or billionaires. They're just really, really good at being human. You also coin the term peak experiences, those rare, transcendent moments when everything just clicks and you feel connected to the universe. Like that time you cried at a sunset, or accidentally found inner peace in a Trader Joe's parking lot. Maslow becomes the father of humanistic psychology, a field so optimistic, it practically high-fives you as you walk in. It inspires therapy, education, business, and the entire modern self-help industry. And yes, every inspirational quote on a beach background, that's your legacy, but you're not done. You eventually update your pyramid to add another level, self-transcendence, where you go beyond yourself to serve others, experience awe, or just vibe with the cosmos. You don't want people to just function, you want them to flourish. You believe that every person, deep down, wants to grow. Even Kevin, who still eats cereal with a fork. But while you're building pyramids of joy, another figure is rising. She doesn't talk about dreams or rewards or triangle charts. She talks about how you're not crazy. Your environment just kind of sucks. Enter Karen Horney, the woman who told Freud to sit down and redefined anxiety before it was a lifestyle. It's the early 20th century, and psychology still looks like a gentleman's club, full of cigar smoke and mother complexes. Freud's theories rule the day. Women, according to him, are just men with penis envy, which somehow made sense to people at the time. Enter you, Karen Horney, pronounced Horney, but honestly, you've corrected it so many times you've just given up. You're brilliant, bold, and you've had enough of men interpreting every problem as either fear of castration or an unresolved Oedipus situation. You look at Freud's theories and say, what if it's not the anatomy that's the issue, Sigmund? What if it's society? Boom, the room goes quiet. Somewhere in Vienna, a monocle shatters. You argue that women don't have penis envy, they have power envy, or more precisely, status envy. They aren't neurotic because of some anatomical shortcoming. They're neurotic because they're living in a world designed to keep them small, quiet, and preferably making strudel. Your big idea, basic anxiety, that deep, internal feeling of being small, helpless, and unsafe in a hostile world, or, as modern psychology calls it, Monday. You believe this anxiety starts in childhood and shapes our behavior for life. And to deal with it, we develop strategies. Move toward people, please them, cling to them. Move against people, dominate them, fight them. Move away from people, withdraw, become self-sufficient. Basically, you either become a people pleaser, a steamroller, or a cozy little hermit burrito. But you're not here just to analyze, you're here to empower. You believe people can change. that neurosis isn't a life sentence. That personality isn't a prison. It's a survival tool we can learn to set down. And you're also one of the first to bring feminism into psychology. You say, let's stop asking what's wrong with women and start asking what's wrong with a system that makes them feel inferior in the first place. Mic. Drop. You move to the US, open your own clinic, and write books that make Freud sweat in his armchair. Titles like The Neurotic Personality of Our Time and Our Inner Conflicts don't just unpack the human mind, they hold it accountable. You're a pioneer in self-analysis, encouraging people to explore their own psyche instead of waiting for someone in a tweed suit to do it for them. You believe that change comes not from dissecting dreams, but from understanding how we relate to the world around us. You influence generations of therapists, feminists, and anyone who's ever thought, maybe it's not me, maybe it's the messed up world I live in. And while the Freud fan club may never fully forgive you, you're fine with that. You didn't come to sit quietly. You came to rebuild psychology for everyone. Not just those with a Viennese mustache and a couch. But the human psyche isn't done evolving. Next up, a man who believes your thoughts shape your reality. Your irrational beliefs are holding you hostage, and the path to mental health involves a good verbal slap of logic. Grab your thinking caps, because here comes Albert Ellis. Imagine going to therapy expecting tissues, soft voices, and the occasional Instead, you get Albert Ellis. You're Ellis. And your idea of therapy is not to pat someone on the back and ask how they feel. No, your motto is basically, stop lying to yourself and let's fix this mess. You create something called rational emotive behavior therapy, or REBT, which is kind of like mental CrossFit for your beliefs. You think most of human suffering doesn't come from what happens to us, but from how ridiculously we interpret it. You say things like, people don't just get upset, they manufacture their own upsetness. Stop shitting all over yourself. You look at someone having a meltdown over a breakup and say, okay, let's examine that irrational belief that you'll die alone because Jessica left you for her Zumba instructor. Your big idea? It's not the event itself. It's the belief about the event that wrecks people. Someone gets fired. That sucks. Sure. But it's not, I got fired, that causes the breakdown. It's I got fired, so I must be worthless and doomed forever. You teach people to challenge those irrational beliefs and replace them with, well, less terrible ones. You basically turn people into their own mental lawyers, evidence, logic, rebuttals. If Freud was dream analysis, you're cross-examination. You even create a catchy little formula, A to B to C, activating event. B, beliefs, consequences. Most people think A causes C, but you're here to say, no buddy, it's the garbage at B that's ruining your life. And you're not afraid to get spicy. Your sessions are loud, fast, sharp. You once held shame-attacking exercises where you made patients deliberately embarrass themselves in public to prove the world wouldn't end. We're talking about walking up to strangers and asking for directions to Mars, that kind of public awkwardness. Your goal isn't comfort, it's freedom. You want people to stop chasing external validation, stop catastrophizing every awkward interaction, and stop believing the world owes them perfect conditions. To you, mental health is a choice, and therapy is a skill, not a hug. You publish over 70 books, give thousands of lectures, and in between all that, you somehow become one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century. You prove that real change isn't about lying on a couch. It's about standing up and telling your irrational beliefs to take a hike. But therapy isn't all logic and charts. Next up is a man who believes healing happens not in analysis, but in genuineness, in being heard, understood, and accepted as you are. Bring on the kindness, because Carl Rogers is about to revolutionize therapy with radical listening. If Freud was your judgy uncle, and Ellis was your brutally honest life coach, then Carl Rogers is your soft-spoken, emotionally fluent friend who listens so hard. It feels like therapy just being near him. You're Rogers, and you believe therapy isn't about interpreting dreams or debating irrational beliefs. It's about being real, being present, and being radically accepting. You don't try to fix people like broken toasters. You believe that when someone is truly heard, understood, and not judged, they start to fix themselves. This was revolutionary. Back in the 1940s, therapy looked like this. Analyst: tell me about your childhood. Patient: well, my father. Analyst: Yes. Classic oral stage trauma. You come along and say, what if we just listened? Welcome to person-centered therapy, where the therapist isn't an authority figure with a clipboard. They're a compassionate mirror. Your job isn't to label, diagnose, or direct. Your job is to create the conditions where a person feels safe enough to explore themselves. You offer what you call the core conditions of real healing: empathy, the kind that makes people cry and say, "You actually get me." Congruence, being real, not therapist robot. 9000. Unconditional positive regard, which is therapist speak for, "I like you, even when you ugly cry." People walk into your office expecting psychology. They leave with emotional hydration. You even sit on the same level as your clients. No desk, no fancy suit, no superiority complex. You might as well have handed them a cozy blanket and a mug of cocoa and said, "It's okay, you don't have to perform here." And here's the kicker. This works really well. You help veterans with PTSD, teenagers in crisis, and families on the verge of falling apart. You even hold peace talks in South Africa and Northern Ireland, believing that deep listening could bridge not just personal trauma, but political divides. You're also the spiritual godparent of the self-help movement. You believe people are basically good, and that inside everyone is a deep, natural drive to grow. Yes, even Chad from accounting. Instead of treating clients like broken puzzles, you say, "You already have what you need. I'm just here to help you hear yourself." While others write psychology textbooks that sound like IKEA manuals, your books, like On Becoming a Person, read like heartfelt letters from a wise friend. And your influence stretches far beyond therapy, into education, leadership, parenting, and anywhere someone wants to be heard without being fixed. So next time someone says, "I just needed someone to listen," that's Rogers. That's his legacy, quietly holding space in a loud world. Now dive into the world of Alfred Adler, psychology's underrated underdog, with big ideas about ego, community, and why you always feel like you're one-upping someone else. You're Alfred Adler, and you didn't come to play small. While Freud was busy obsessing over your dreams, and Jung was mapping your myths, you took a sharper look at the everyday struggles people face, especially that sneaky little gremlin called inferiority. Your big idea? Nobody's perfect, and everyone feels a bit less than at some point. But here's the twist. It's how you handle that feeling that shapes your personality, or, as you put it, that tiny voice saying you're not good enough is actually the engine driving all human behavior. You didn't buy Freud's focus on sex as the ultimate motivator. Instead, you said, people are motivated by a desire to belong and feel significant. Basically, it's not just about what's inside your head, but where you see yourself in relation to others. You believe humans are social creatures who develop in the context of family, community, and culture, not isolated little islands of neurosis. You coined terms like the inferiority complex, that pervasive feeling of "I'm not enough" that can lead to either crippling self-doubt or over-the-top compensation. You knew plenty of people who, instead of accepting their shortcomings, try to build themselves up by knocking others down. Hello, office politics. Your solution? Develop a style of life, a unique way each person strives for significance and tries to overcome their inferiority. Some do it by becoming the class clown, others by climbing the corporate ladder, and some by quietly being the glue holding their family together. You also introduced the idea of social interest, the healthy drive to connect and contribute to the welfare of others. Basically, you said, "Hey, the world's not just about you, it's about us." Adler's approach was practical and optimistic. You weren't interested in dissecting neuroses endlessly. You wanted people to grow, cooperate, and find purpose. He even believed that early childhood experiences set the stage for your whole personality, but it's your choices and goals that really define you. So yes, your weird obsession with collecting novelty mugs probably says more about your current style of life than your toddler years. Adler's ideas laid the groundwork for modern therapies focused on social skills, self-esteem, and personal growth. And if you ever felt like you were the odd one out, remember, Adler was the psychologist who said that feeling inferior is part of being human, but you get to decide if that feeling becomes your prison or your power. Next up, ready for a wild ride with a man who combined psychology with philosophy, psychoanalysis with mysticism, and gave us concepts like the persona, the shadow, and that weird part of your brain that loves tarot cards. Oh wait, that's Jung again, so instead, how about we explore the bold, pioneering mind of Anna Freud, who took her father's ideas and put them through the child psychology blender. Meet Anna Freud, Sigmund Freud's youngest daughter, who didn't just inherit his nose or his penchant for cigars, she inherited his passion for understanding the mind. But she wasn't about to just be Freud's daughter. Nope. Anna decided to carve out her own psychological kingdom, and she did it with a mix of science, grit, and a whole lot of tough love. While dear old dad was busy analyzing dreams and the ID, ego and superego, like they were characters in a soap opera, Anna turned her attention to something no one else was really focusing on: kids. That's right. She's basically the godmother of child psychoanalysis. She knew kids weren't just tiny adults with bad table manners. They had their own complex inner worlds that deserved serious study. But Anna's real claim to fame is her brilliant work on the ego and its defense mechanisms. Those sneaky mental moves your brain makes to keep you sane when life throws curveballs. You know, when you catch yourself blaming your dog for eating your homework, or suddenly forget that embarrassing thing you said at the party. That's your ego's secret arsenal at work. Anna named and described mechanisms like repression. I don't remember that awkward text I sent. It never happened. Projection. I'm not mad at you, you're mad at me. Regression. I'm an adult, but today I'm going to binge watch cartoons and eat ice cream because stress. Sublimation. I'm stressed, so I'm going to channel my energy into interpretive dance. These defense mechanisms aren't just cute psychology buzzwords. They're essential survival tools your brain uses to protect your ego from emotional overload. Anna also worked extensively with children affected by trauma, war, and displacement, pioneering therapeutic methods that were compassionate but also practical. She believed in helping kids express emotions and build resilience, not just label their behavior as problematic. Her work wasn't just academic. She founded the Hampstead War Nursery during WWI to care for and study children affected by bombings and displacement. Basically a daycare meets psychology lab, meets emotional support HQ. So while Freud Sr. was the king of the unconscious, Anna was the queen of helping the ego hold its ground. She showed the world that psychology isn't just about digging into the past. It's about understanding how we protect ourselves in the present. And hey, next time you catch yourself making excuses, deflecting blame, or justifying your binge-watching habits as self-care, remember, that's your ego defense mechanisms working overtime. And Anna Freud gave them all their names. Let's jump into John B. Watson's world, behaviorism's loudest cheerleader, who basically told psychology, stop looking inside the head and watch the show outside. Picture this. It's the early 1900s. Psychology has been busy diving into the mysterious depths of the mind, analyzing dreams, talking about unconscious desires, and basically acting like a bunch of mind-reading psychics without the crystal balls. Then strolls in John B. Watson, a man with a plan and a stopwatch, who says, hold up, you want science? You can't measure dreams or feelings, but you can measure behavior. So let's focus on what people actually do, not what they say or think. Watson basically threw a giant wrench into Freudian introspection and turned psychology into a kind of behavioral spectator sport. His big motto, psychology should be an objective, experimental science based on observable behavior. Translation: if I can't see it or measure it, I'm not interested. But don't mistake this for ignoring feelings. No, Watson believed emotions were just learned responses. You smile when you see a puppy, that's conditioning. You cringe at the dentist's chair, also conditioning. Basically, Watson wanted to explain everything as a chain of stimulus-response links, like a giant mental Rube Goldberg machine. One of his most famous and slightly controversial experiments was with a toddler known as Little Albert. Watson paired a cute white rat with a loud, scary noise, and presto, Little Albert started to cry whenever he saw the rat. He basically showed that fears aren't just in your head, they can be taught. Also, it's the kind of experiment that makes today's ethics committees faint. Watson's behaviorism was a game changer. Before him, psychologists had to rely on what people said they felt or thought, which can be as reliable as a weather forecast from a magic 8-ball. Watson said, forget the mental mumbo-jumbo. If you want to know what makes people tick, watch what they do. He wasn't just about lab rats and toddlers, though. Watson took his ideas into the real world, including parenting. His advice? Treat kids like little behavior experiments, consistent rewards and punishments to shape behavior, which, depending on your perspective, sounds either efficient or like a horror movie plot. And yes, Watson also had a huge impact on advertising. If you ever wondered why you suddenly had to buy a certain soap or snack, thank Watson's idea that emotions and desires could be manipulated through conditioning. But Watson's approach wasn't without critics. Some said it ignored the complexity of human thought and emotion, reducing people to puppets of stimulus and response. Still, behaviorism dominated psychology for decades, influencing therapy, education, and even animal training. So next time you're trying to quit a bad habit or training your dog to sit, you're riding on Watson's legacy, because he proved behavior could be changed, measured, and even predicted. No mind reading required. Imagine being a psychologist who looks at kids not as miniature adults, but as little philosophers in training, stumbling through life stage by stage, like a video game, where you unlock new brain powers as you level up. Enter Jean Piaget, the Swiss psychologist, who basically said, kids don't just know less than adults, they think differently. And he wasn't just guessing, he spent decades watching children, asking them questions, and cracking the code on how their minds develop. Piaget's big idea. Cognitive development happens in 4 major stages, each like a new chapter in the How Your Brain Works manual. 1. Sensory motor stage, 0 mere 2 years. Babies learn about the world by touching, tasting, and waving their arms around wildly, basically turning life into a hands-on science experiment. 2. Pre-operational stage, 2 mere 7 years. Toddlers become little storytellers and magicians, thinking the world revolves around them. And honestly, it kind of does. They believe their thoughts can make things happen, like wishing your toy back to life after it's been accidentally thrown under the couch. 3. Concrete operational stage, 7 mere 11 years. Kids start to get logical, sort of. They can do basic math and understand other people have feelings, but ask them to explain abstract ideas, and you'll get a blank stare, like they just saw a unicorn. 4. Formal operational stage, 12 plus years. Welcome to teen mode. Now they can think abstractly, plan ahead, and argue about politics for hours, or at least pretend to. What made Piaget's work so revolutionary? He didn't just treat kids like little adults who know less. He showed that children's thinking fundamentally changes as they grow. Think of it as a mental glow-up. Piaget also introduced the idea of schemas, mental frameworks we use to understand the world. When new info comes in, we either assimilate it into what we already know, like adding a new flavor to your ice cream collection, or accommodate by changing our mental framework, like discovering kale isn't ice cream and maybe not as tasty. Thanks to Piaget, we understand why asking a 4-year-old to share toys or a 10-year-old to just calm down is often a hopeless mission. Their brains are still building the operating system. And here's a fun fact. Piaget's work didn't just stay in labs and classrooms. His ideas influence everything from education to parenting techniques, to how we design children's TV shows, because kids' brains are no joke. So next time a kid gives you a puzzling answer, or acts like their logic was written by a sitcom writer, thank Jean Piaget. He taught us to appreciate the weird, wonderful world of the developing mind. So there you have it, your whirlwind tour through the minds of some of history's greatest psychologists. From Sigmund Freud's obsession with dreams and awkward family drama, to John B. Watson turning us all into behavior-watching lab rats, and Jean Piaget showing that kids aren't just small adults, but tiny logic-building geniuses in training. Psychology isn't just about couches, ink blots, or figuring out why your cat stares at walls for hours, though that's still a mystery. It's a wild, messy, fascinating quest to understand what makes humans tick, our thoughts, feelings, and sometimes downright bizarre behaviors. And here's the best part. Every one of these psychologists, with their quirks and theories, reminds us that being human is a complicated, hilarious, and endlessly interesting journey. Sometimes we're irrational, sometimes we're predictable, and sometimes we just need a little therapy couch. So next time you catch yourself overthinking that text you just sent or wondering why your brain is such a drama queen, remember those thoughts and feelings are exactly what these thinkers spent their lives trying to figure out. Your life as a Viking raider, horns, axes, and absolutely zero chill. Congratulations, you're now a Viking. You wake up in a smoky longhouse. Your bed is hay, your pillow is a dog, and your breakfast is a bowl of cold porridge, if you're lucky. If not, it's dried fish that taste like regret. Outside, your longship bobs in the fjord, waiting to take you across the sea to liberate some treasure, aka loot everything that isn't nailed down. You've got an axe, a beard, and just enough personal hygiene to make monks cry. And today, you're going raiding. Welcome to your Viking childhood, where the floor is mud, the roof leaks, and your daily nutrition depends on whether your dad remembered to salt the fish. You are born into a world of frostbitten fingers, smoky longhouses, and people named things like Skull Crusher, who still manage to pinch your cheeks and call you adorable. From the moment you could walk, and possibly before, you're handed a stick and encouraged to start poking things. Spears, axes, knives. It's a world where if you can lift it, you can weaponize it. Forget nap time. The only time you're lying down is when you're pretending to be dead during hide and seek, which in Viking culture is just advanced battle training. Education? Puffed. There's no alphabet song here. Just a long list of heroic tales you have to memorize. Like the ballad of Thor's left eyebrow, the time Loki turned into a horse and made it weird, the saga of Uncle Bjorn who punched a bear and then married it. Depending on the version, you recite them by the hearth at night, while dodging embers and chewing dried fish leather that tastes like it died twice. Your prized possessions as a child, a wooden sword, your uncle carved while slightly drunk, a tiny round shield that doubles as a soup bowl when necessary, and depending on the season, a chicken named Victory, which may or may not survive winter or dinner. Clothes, wool tunics that itch like betrayal, shoes made from the sadness of deer, and a fur cloak that smells like someone fought it before wearing it. Entertainment options include throwing snowballs at your cousins and claiming it was a training exercise, listening to grandma's stories about trolls and ice giants, and wondering if she's just talking about your dad when he skips breakfast. Carving dragons into absolutely everything. The door frame, your walking stick, the dining bench, and probably your sister's forehead if she sits still too long. Discipline? If you misbehave, there's no time out. There's go outside and clean fish heads until you've reflected on your sins. Your chores are handed down with the seriousness of a blood oath. Feed the animal, haul water, try not to fall in the well again, and if you ever get sick, well, the village healer has two remedies: a suspicious soup made from moss and hoping for the best. Despite the rough edges, it's not all bad. The stars are bright, the fjords are beautiful, and your people love a good story. If you do something brave, even if it's just standing up to a goose, you'll be celebrated with applause, praise, and possibly a new nickname, like Goose Slayer. This is your beginning. Small Viking, muddy, hungry, slightly frostbitten, but destined for great things. Or at the very least, destined to carry a really cool axe one day. Congratulations, you've hit puberty in the Viking Age. That means your voice is cracking like ice on a fjord, your sweat smells like boiled onions, and your elders have just handed you a weapon longer than your attention span. You're 13 now, which means one thing in your village: you're old enough to die gloriously. Childhood is over. The time for chicken chasing and stick swinging has passed. Now, it's time to learn how to properly raid, fight, and not immediately embarrass yourself in front of the entire clan. Step 1. Training begins. Training usually starts with the basics. How to throw a spear without impaling your own foot. How to block an axe swing without crying. How to look menacing, even when a goat is aggressively following you. You also have to master the ancient Viking art of rowing until your arms fall off. Longship drills are a daily ritual. 50 warriors packed shoulder to shoulder, rowing in rhythm, while the village elder shouts things like "row harder." Pretend the water insulted your mother. There's no gym in the Viking Age, but that's fine. Who needs a gym when you spend your mornings flipping logs, dragging rocks, and wrestling other sweaty teenagers in the mud, while your relatives cheer you on and place bets? Step 2. Weapons practice. You're introduced to your very first real axe. It is beautiful. It is deadly. It is also heavier than your ambitions. You swing it with all your might and immediately lodge it in a tree, a fence post, or your own shin, depending on how the gods are feeling that day. You're also given a shield and told it's your second skin. Unfortunately, it's about the size of a pizza, and you're expected to use it to block swords, arrows, and the occasional flying insult. Step 3. Building your reputation or dying trying. You start going on little expeditions, hunting trips, scouting runs, and maybe even a mini-raid on the next village, over just to borrow their goats. The idea is to prove you're not completely useless, which is harder than it sounds when your competition includes Ragnar, who already has chest hair and a body count, Sigrid, who bench presses tree trunks and could crush your skull between her biceps, and Eric, who communicates only through grunts and war cries. Every victory earns you a little more respect. Every failure earns you a nickname you may never escape. Sven the Slippery fell off a longship. Cunt the Cow Tipper, self-explanatory. Bold Ewan the Screamer panicked during a goat stampede. Step 4. Mead and mating dances. As puberty progresses, you're also introduced to the horrible, confusing world of Viking courtship. You want to impress someone? You don't swipe right. You bring them a gift, maybe a carved comb, a poem, or the severed head of a rival. How romantic. If that fails, you challenge their father to an axe-throwing contest. If that fails, well, you go cry into your beard, or what you hope will one day become a beard. To numb the sting of rejection and battle blisters, you get your first proper gulp of mead. It tastes like fermented fire and courage, and after 2 sips, you're either dancing on a table or passed out under it. Step 5. The moment of glory, or deep shame. Eventually, the village chieftain points a finger at you and says, You're ready. You are now part of a raid. You've officially made it. You're not a child anymore. You're a warrior, one that's nervous, sweating profusely, and probably forgot where he put his helmet. But a warrior nonetheless. You board the longship. The drums begin. The sail unfurls. The sea is calling. And so is adventure, riches, and possibly severe bodily injury. You've trained. You've sweated. You've awkwardly flirted with someone by offering them a trout. Now, it's time for the main event, the Viking raid. You and the rest of the crew climb aboard the longship, which is basically a floating dragon with a terrible suspension system. There are no cabins, no toilets, and certainly no sunscreen. Just 30 or 40 warriors packed together like angry sardines with commitment issues. The voyage begins. First challenge, not dying at sea. The North Sea is cold. The waves are angry, and you've been rowing so long your muscles have unionized and are threatening to strike. The ship smells like they, sweative, wetty wool, and Haldor, who insists socks are for cowards. You eat dried fish, drink rainwater, and sleep sitting upright next to a man who snores like Thor having a tantrum. Morale is a mixed bag. One guy is singing battle songs, another is quietly weeping, and someone's trying to cook stew over a small fire on the boat. Don't ask how. It's probably illegal even in Viking times. Finally, land is sighted. Step 2. The glorious and logistically awkward landing. You charge onto the shore, mud splashing, weapons drawn, yelling like you're in a heavy metal album cover. This is it. Your moment. Glory awaits. Except the village is mostly old farmers, confused sheep, and a child eating porridge. No one was expecting company. The dramatic Viking raid has just turned into an awkward burglary. But don't worry, you're not just here to burn things. Vikings actually liked valuables and disliked unnecessary effort, so the process goes something like 1. Break down the gate, or, if unlocked, open it gently. 2. Shout a lot. 3. Steal anything shiny or edible. 4. Possibly leave behind a thank you rune stone if you're feeling extra polite. Targets of great Viking interest. Silver, money, wheat, money. But edible, livestock. Edible money that walks, religious, relics. High resale value in certain markets. If you're lucky, there's very little resistance. If you're unlucky, the town has a knight who really enjoys his job. Either way, you're here to make a name for yourself. Combat tips for the aspiring raider. Always keep your shield up. Arrows don't care about your feelings. If someone is twice your size, aim for the kneecaps. Yelling your own name makes you 13% more intimidating. Science is unsure why. Moments that might get you remembered in a saga, taking down a warrior with a flawless axe throw. Even if you meant to throw it at someone else, rescuing a comrade by headbutting a guy through a door, dramatically kicking down a church door, and stealing a candle holder, for the gods. Moments that might get you mocked for life. Getting knocked out by a goat, falling in a well mid-raid, accidentally setting your pants on fire while looting a bakery, aftermath, counting the loot, the wounds, and the stories. Once the raiding is done, you return to the ship, pockets jingling and ego swollen. You might have a new scar, a slightly cursed artifact, and possibly a new nickname like Troll Kicker or Harold the Flammable. You sail home to a hero's welcome, drums, feasts, and at least one drunk uncle who insists he invented raiding. And then, the saga spreads. You're not just a Viking anymore. You're a raider, a warrior of legend, a bringer of chaos, an importer of goats. But your journey isn't over, because being a Viking isn't just about pillaging. It's about power, politics, legacy, and occasionally remembering which sheep belongs to whom. You've survived the raid, returned home with sacks of treasure, and possibly a stolen chicken that won't stop judging you. But what now? You can't raid every Tuesday forever. Sometimes, a Viking needs to deal with the three great powers of Norse life. 1. The gods. 2. The laws. 3. Your nosy neighbor Bjorn, who keeps accidentally expanding his fence into your yard. The gods. Viking customer service for life's problems. As a Viking, your spiritual life is wonderfully chaotic. You don't worship just one god. You've got a full cast of deities, each with wildly different job descriptions. It's like running a divine HR department. Odin, CEO of wisdom, war, and aggressively staring into the void. Thor, god of thunder, violence, and poor impulse control. Freyja, goddess of love, beauty, and accidental battles. Loki, god of mischief, lies, and things that explode when they shouldn't. Need a good harvest. Sacrifice a goat. Want victory in battle? Sacrifice a bigger goat. Accidentally angered a sea spirit? Sorry, now you are the goat. You attend rituals at the local temple, or, more commonly, at a guy's barn that's been rebranded as a holy longhouse. There's chanting, drinking, dramatic toasts to the gods, and at least one man who always tries to wrestle during the blessing. And if you die in battle, no worries, that's a promotion. You either go to Valhalla, where you fight all day, feast all night, and drink enough mead to rehydrate a camel, or end up in Folkvingor, Freyja's personal afterlife, for warriors who don't love punching quite as much. Both options beat your cousin Olaf's fate. He slipped on a rutabaga, and is probably haunting a pantry now. The laws, Viking justice, now with extra yelling. You'd think being a Viking means lawlessness. You'd be wrong. Viking society was full of strict laws, public courts, and extremely enthusiastic shouting matches. Disputes are settled at the thing, which is not a monster. It's the Viking version of court. Everyone gathers in a field, yells about whose cow destroyed whose roof, and waits for a local chieftain to bang his axe and declare someone guilty. Punishments range from sounds gold, livestock, or 1 week of letting your enemy insult your beard without retaliation. Outlawry, basically. You're kicked out of society, and everyone is allowed to chase you like a real-life video game. Or in rare cases, ritual combat, which is like a divorce trial, but with way more spears. Vikings were obsessed with honor. Say something bad about someone's reputation, and you'd better be ready to duel at dawn, insult their ancestors, and write a very aggressive poem about it. Also, don't steal someone's horse. That's not just illegal, it's social suicide, unless of course the horse insulted your family, in which case it's complicated. The politics, power, plots, and passive-aggressive axes. You've got loot, a cool scar, and a strong jawline. Naturally, you start climbing the Viking political ladder. At first, it's simple. Bribe a few villagers with mead, win some duels, host a feast where nobody dies. Then you become a local jarl, which is like a Viking mayor, but louder. Now you've got responsibilities. Settling land disputes, protecting your people, and occasionally conquering your neighbors for diplomatic reasons, of course. But politics is risky. One day you're the toast of the fjord. The next, you're in a fjord with toast crumbs in your beard, running from your former allies. There's always that one guy who wants your seat, your longship, or your extremely fashionable wolf fur cape. And believe me, no Viking ever got to power by being reasonable. So to stay on top, you beard, marry into the right families, preferably ones with terrifying grandmothers, forge alliances through epic feasts and even more epic hangovers, and threaten your rivals with the very legal-sounding phrase, "Let us talk peacefully or not at all." But of course, being a Viking wasn't all politics and axe-measuring contests. There's still the matter of what happens after your last raid, last battle, and final toast to Odin. Which brings us to the next and final part of your journey. So, you've conquered distant shores, raided until your arms begged for mercy, and politically maneuvered your way into becoming the most gloriously bearded person in 3 villages and a fjord. But eventually, the mead runs dry, your knees start sounding like old ships creaking in the wind, and someone younger, dumber, and way too confident with a battle axe starts eyeing your seat at the longhouse. Your time is near. But don't worry, this is the part where you get to be immortal. A Viking's death. Dramatic, glorious, and often on fire. There are only 2 acceptable ways for a Viking hero to die. 1, in battle, preferably while shouting something poetic about revenge and door turnips. 2, in old age, surrounded by family, recounting your tales, and pretending your back pain was from lifting a troll, and not just slipping on ice in front of the goats. Of course, once you die, the real party starts. No Viking funeral is complete without a boat, because you're not going to the afterlife in a cart like a peasant. Fire, because dramatic exits are key, and someone crying so loudly, you start to suspect they're being a bit performative. If you were rich, respected, and didn't owe anyone a pig, your body might be laid in a full ship, stacked with treasures, weapons, and possibly a sacrificed horse or 2, depending on how awkward things are with animal rights in the afterlife. Then someone shoots a flaming arrow into the boat, which drifts into the mist, catches fire, and looks incredibly cool, unless they miss, in which case your cousin has to sheepishly row out with a torch and pretend it was all part of the plan. The afterlife, where warriors feast, fight, and probably don't pay rent. Once your charred boat hits the horizon, it's time for your soul to clock in at one of several Viking afterlives. Valhalla, Odin's grand hall, where you fight all day, die gloriously, get resurrected, then feast all night on roast boar and eternal ale. It's like heaven, if heaven had more swords and less harp music. Folksvangar, Frasier's Field, where you chill in a more elegant setting with fewer broken noses and more emotionally available warriors. Or, if you were really unpleasant, Helheim, not to be confused with Christian hell. This one's more like eternal winter, with bad lighting and no snacks. It's where people who died of disease, laziness, or choking on herring go to think about their life choices. Here's the secret. No Viking truly dies until they're forgotten. So your final task is to become a saga. This isn't just a bedtime story. A saga is a full-on epic poem passed down through generations, ideally featuring you wrestling a bear or a very large rude dog, witty comebacks shouted mid-battle, a dramatic betrayal involving a cousin, a goat, and a love triangle, and at least one line where someone says, "His beard was thick enough to block an arrow." Your family will gather by the fire, drink too much, and argue over whether you actually fought that sea monster or just got stuck in seaweed and panicked convincingly. Doesn't matter. You're legend now. If you were really something special, like built your own longship with your teeth special, maybe a skald, a Viking poet, composes a song in your honor. It gets sung at feasts, weddings, and probably at your grandson's school recital, much to his embarrassment. And when future raiders set sail, they'll whisper your name for luck, or to scare off rival clans, or because they want to borrow your epic catchphrase, "Let the wind guide us," unless it's Bjorn's turn to steer, in which case we're doomed. Your Viking life. The recap. You were born in the cold, raised on fish, and taught to fear nothing but poorly fermented mead. You sailed stormy seas, swung steel with poetic rage, and wore your scars like jewelry. You faced gods, kings, lawsuits, and at least one swarm of angry bees. You died with glory, you burned like a comet. And now you live forever in stories, because while your bones rest beneath snow and stone, your name echoes in laughter, in legend, and in every awkward tavern bard who tries to rhyme Viking with liking. You weren't just a raider, you weren't just a warrior, you were a saga. Now rest, hero. Your longhouse in Valhalla awaits. Grab your katana, tighten your hakama, and prepare to bow so often your spine files for overtime, because we're about to dive into your life as a samurai in feudal Japan. Congratulations. You've been born into the elite military class of feudal Japan. You are not just any warrior. You are a samurai, a living embodiment of Bushido, or the way of the warrior. That sounds cool, until you realize Bushido also includes the way of folding letters properly, and the way of not slouching even when your armor weighs 40 pounds. Your childhood is strict, structured, and about as fun as a tea ceremony held underwater. From the moment you can walk, you are trained to respect your elders and everyone else, practice swordsmanship, even before you're allowed to hold a spoon, write delicate poetry about leaves falling off trees, while also learning to remove a man's spleen in one clean slice. You must always be prepared, at all times, even when you're asleep, even when you're bathing, especially when you're composing a haiku, because nothing ruins a poem like an ambush. Your haiku might go something like this. Steel whispers softly as cherry blossoms flutter. Oh no, it's bandits. Now that you're trained, mentally steeled, and emotionally repressed, it's time to suit up for glory, or, more accurately, layer up like a cursed onion. Layer 1. The undergarments of unspeakable sophistication. Before you can even think about armor, you must put on your kimono, your tabi socks, and your fundoshi, which is basically a glorified loincloth designed by someone who hated comfort. This is followed by a set of silk underrobes, because a samurai must be elegant at all times, including during surprise arrow ambushes. Oh, and if you think silk makes you sweat, just wait until we get to the boiled lacquer armor that traps heat like an oven made of sadness. Layer 2. The armor of anxiety. Now we begin the layering of Fu Yoroi, great armor, which was invented during a fever dream where someone said, "What if we wore the heaviest possible thing in the worst possible climate?" You strap on Miching Sazari, armored skirt flaps, to protect your thighs, and remind you of the jingling keys of a janitor from hell. Sodered shoulder guards the size of dinner trays, good for blocking arrows, also good for knocking over small furniture when turning sideways. Kote armored sleeves that protect your arms and turn your high fives into full contact combat. Do, the cuirass, or torso armor. This is what really bakes your ribs until they become philosophical, and just when you think you're done, you are not done. Layer 3. The helmet that says, "I mean business, and I have neck pain." The kabuto is more than a helmet. It's a fashion statement, a warning sign, and a medieval mood ring all in one. It might have a golden crescent moon to say, "I am mysterious and dangerous," a furrowed metal brow to say, "I haven't smiled since the Mongol invasions," or an enormous mustache to say, "My face is more intimidating than yours, even before coffee." Attached to the kabuto is a shikoro, a neck guard that protects you from decapitation, and also makes turning your head a full-body exercise. And don't forget your menfor, the face mask, usually shaped like a scowling demon, or a deeply disappointed father figure. It protects your nose and hides your tears. The blades, more than just fancy cutlery. The final touch, your daiwo, your long katana, and short wikizashi. Together, they are called the daisho, meaning big, little. You wear them proudly, like deadly bookends. The katana is for battle. The wakizashi is for backup, indoors, or, on really bad days, for honorable self-disembowelment. The samurai life really said, no pressure, but carry this, just in case you ever dishonor your boss by blinking too loudly. Some samurai also carry a tanto, a knife, for situations where you just need to express yourself very pointedly. In summary, you look awesome. You feel like melted rice. When fully dressed, you are majestic. You are terrifying. You are a symbol of ancient discipline and power. But mostly, you are sweaty creaky. One sneeze away from toppling over like an armored turtle, and yet you bear it all without complaint, because a samurai does not moan. He nods solemnly, even as his back screams and his socks fill with regrets. You're armored up, sworded up, and spiritually aligned with your ancestors. That's good, because now it's time for duty. The noble obligation that sounds majestic until you realize it mostly means doing stuff you didn't volunteer for at ungodly hours. Wake up. It's time to be stoic. The samurai day begins before dawn because of course it does. Honor doesn't believe in sleeping in. Your eyes crack open. You rise without groaning because stoicism. You wash your face with cold water. Stare meaningfully into the distance and mentally prepare for a day of feudal chaos wrapped in formality. Breakfast is minimal. Maybe a little rice, miso soup, and pickled vegetables that taste like someone dared a cucumber to disappoint you. But food isn't about enjoyment. It's fuel for discipline, and discipline tastes slightly fermented. What does a samurai actually do all day? Glad you asked. Being a samurai isn't all epic duels and cherry blossoms drifting across your katana. It's also administrative tasks for your daimyo lord, like collecting taxes or writing stern letters with impeccable calligraphy. You are a warrior accountant, basically. Training, because even when you're already good at slicing things, you need to stay slice ready. That means archery, horseback riding, sword drills, and the occasional what if I had to cut a guy while leaping off a wall simulation. Guard duty, which is a lot like standing perfectly still while internally screaming about how itchy your armor is. Moral reflection, where you sit cross-legged and think about the Bushido code, aka how to be the strongest, saddest gentleman alive. And if your daimyo says jump, you jump into battle, into fire, into diplomacy, into paperwork. You are honor's multi-tool, and you better not complain unless you want to find out how much dignity fits in a rice bowl. Let's talk about the Bushido code, aka the samurai user manual. You don't just follow rules, you breathe them. Bushido, the way of the warrior, is your internal operating system, and it includes values like Bushido, Richishans, you do what's right, even if it ruins your weekend. Your courage, especially the kind that says, I'll totally charge that spear wall. Rei, respect you bow so much your spine starts filing complaints. Makoto, honesty, including telling your lord his poetry is profound when it's clearly about birds again. Meiyo, honor, which is everything, your name, your family, your last will and testament. To break the code is worse than death. Actually, death is the solution for breaking the code. It's a strict system, very little wiggle room. Battle can happen. Anytime. Literally, anytime. You may be called to war at any moment. 1 second you're arranging rocks in your Zen garden. The next you're riding into a neighboring province to settle a centuries-old grudge because someone insulted a relative's haircut. Battle is brutal. No guns yet. This is up close, sharp edges only mayhem. You clash with other samurai in coordinated formations. Archers fire from behind, and everyone yells about honor in a way that feels very personal. But don't worry, your enemies are just as uncomfortable in their armor as you are, and should you lose, well, there's a special solution for that. It's called seppuku, and it's less of a plan B and more of a really intense resignation letter. By sunset, you're a legend in pain. The sun sets on your day. You've trained, you've served, you've not died. A decent 10/10 samurai performance. You remove your armor piece by piece, like a collapsing shelf. Your body aches, your hair's flat, your dignity remains untouched. You sit, drink tea, and maybe write poetry about leaves falling like forgotten dreams. Your sword leans beside you. Your soul is at peace, until duty calls again, probably in 5 minutes. If you think the samurai's katana is just a fancy sword, you're about to get schooled. This blade isn't just steel, it's the very soul of a samurai forged in fire, blessed by ancestors, and polished until it's sharper than your morning sarcasm. The katana, more than just a pointy stick. The katana is curved, slender, and deadly, like a ninja's eyebrow, but much less forgiving. It's crafted through a complex process that involves folding the steel hundreds of times. Think of it as the samurai's version of gourmet cooking, but instead of soufflés, you get a weapon that slices through armor like warm butter. Owning a katana means you're a walking legend, because not everyone gets to carry one. You have a serious obsession with sharpness. You probably spent more time polishing your sword than sleeping. Your sword isn't just a weapon, it's an extension of your hand, your honor, and your bad mood before breakfast. Training, the never-ending sword dance samurai spent hours practicing kenjutsu, the art of the sword. Imagine an elegant dance, but replace the music with shouts, grunts, and the occasional clink of metal hitting metal. You learn to slice, parry, and disarm opponents with precision, fluidity, and style. But don't be fooled. It wasn't all graceful swishing. Sometimes your sword got stuck in armor, awkward. Sometimes you slipped on muddy battlefield dirt and face planted, humbling. And sometimes your opponent was just faster, and you got a sudden unwanted tattoo made of sword scars. The wakizashi, your backup plan and last resort. Alongside your katana, you carry a wakizashi, a shorter sword that's perfect for close quarters, indoor fights, or when you're too tired to swing the big one. The daisho katana plus wakizashi was like your samurai Swiss Army knife. Long story short, if your katana was the flashy star of the show, the wakizashi was the dependable understudy who always showed up. Sword drama, rivalries, challenges, and honor fencing. Here's the juicy part. Samurai weren't just sword experts. They were also the original drama queens of feudal Japan. Dueling rivals was common, and not always about honor. Sometimes it was because your friend insulted their haircut. Challenge matches were a way to prove skill, settle scores, or just avoid doing paperwork. Imagine a high-stakes game of rock, paper, scissors, but with swords and slightly higher mortality. Sword etiquette was strict. Waving your blade around recklessly could start a fight faster than you can say, "I meant to do that." Seppuku, the ultimate sword use with a side of drama. If a samurai failed badly enough, whether in battle, politics, or just offending the wrong guy, there was only one honorable exit. Seppuku, ritual suicide. This wasn't just stabbing yourself in the gut. No, this was a carefully choreographed performance involving a short wakizashi or tanto knife, a clean, precise cut, if possible, a trusted assistant waiting nearby to make the final chop, because dignity, yes, but also mercy. Seppuku was the ultimate way to say, "I messed up, but I still have style." It was tragic, terrifying, and oddly poetic. To the samurai, the sword was everything. A weapon, a status symbol, a spiritual companion, and the ultimate conversation starter, mostly because people avoided you if you brought it up. You trained for years to master it, bled for it, and if necessary, died with it in your hand. Because for a samurai, life without the sword was like sushi without rice. Technically possible, but totally pointless. When you picture a samurai, you probably imagine a fearless warrior, relentlessly serious and perfect at everything. But here's a plot twist. Samurai were actual humans. They laughed. They loved. They occasionally messed up their top knots in the morning. Hobbies beyond the battlefield. You don't survive centuries of war by only swinging swords and brooding. Samurai had a surprising range of hobbies, including poetry, writing delicate verses about cherry blossoms, fleeting beauty, and occasionally their latest battle wounds. Because nothing says "I'm tough" like a haiku about how much your shin hurts. Tea ceremony. A ritual so refined and slow it could put modern coffee culture to shame. Samurai used it to meditate, bond and avoid talking about how exhausting war was. Calligraphy. If you can wield a sword, you can wield a brush. Practicing calligraphy helped samurai develop patience and discipline, and gave them something nice to hang on the walls besides battle trophies. Gardening. Tending to Zen gardens was their version of relaxing. Raking gravel into perfect patterns was oddly soothing after a day of slicing through armor. Family and love life. Despite their tough exterior, samurai had soft spots. They married, raised children, and sometimes even tried to sneak out for a quiet date, which was basically a mission impossible given the constant danger and drama. Samurai marriages were often arranged to strengthen alliances. Love was sometimes a side quest, occasionally completed with great success or hilarious failure. They taught their kids not just sword skills, but also values like honor, respect, and how to keep a straight face while your sibling accidentally sets the dojo on fire. Romantic gestures. Picture a warrior, nervously composing a love poem, while trying not to poke himself with his own sword. The struggle was real. Daily struggles behind the scenes. Being a samurai wasn't all glory. Behind the scenes, bell armor itched, rusted, and sometimes gave you weird tan lines. Diets were simple but repetitive. Rice, fish, pickles, and occasionally something that looked suspiciously like ancient mystery stew. Sanitation was medieval, literally. Bathing was an event, not a habit, and often involved strategic scheduling to avoid surprise battles. Injuries were part of the job. Bandaging a sword cut with honor, while trying not to faint, was a skill of its own. The samurai sense of humor. You might think samurai were all serious all the time. Nope, they had humor, dry, witty, and sometimes a little dark. Jokes about how armor made you look like a walking sushi roll. sarcastic remarks on the irony of writing peaceful poetry after a violent day, practical jokes during training, because even warriors need to blow off steam, retirement, more like a new chapter. When samurai retired or lost their position, life didn't just end. Many became teachers, sharing their knowledge with the next generation. Some turned to art, philosophy, or simple farming. Because hey, even warriors like a break from sword fights. Others struggled to adapt, facing challenges that made battlefield scars seem like a walk in the park. So, while samurai will forever be remembered as fierce, honorable warriors, their lives were rich tapestries woven with duty, love, humor, and everyday struggles. They were not just legends, but real people, sometimes fierce, sometimes flawed, and always fascinating. When it came to battles, samurai didn't just stroll onto the field and politely ask their enemies to surrender. Nope, these were epic, chaotic clashes that could make a modern action movie look like a calm family picnic. The battlefield. Organized chaos. Imagine hundreds of samurai, fully armored, shouting war cries that could wake the dead, horses kicking up clouds of dust, arrows zipping through the air, and the occasional clank of metal hitting metal. Now imagine trying to keep your helmet on while all this is happening. Good luck. Battles often lasted for hours, sometimes days. It was basically the ancient version of a marathon, but with more sword swings and fewer energy drinks. Strategy was crucial. Samurai generals plotted complex maneuvers to outwit their opponents. Picture a deadly game of chess. If the chess pieces were armed, angry, and prone to yelling, terrain mattered. Fighting on a hill, in a forest, or across a river could turn the tide faster than you can say katana. Legendary feats of bravery and occasional goofiness. Some samurai became famous for feats so impressive they border on mythical Miyamoto Musashi, the undefeated swordsman, reportedly fought over 60 duels without losing once. Talk about being that guy at sword practice. Under Tadakatsu, who rode into battle wearing armor so flashy and intimidating that enemies supposedly ran away just seeing him approach. Basically, the medieval equivalent of "don't mess with me, I'm fabulous." Date Masamune, the one-eyed dragon, who lost an eye as a kid, but never let that stop him from conquering lands and looking cool while doing it. He probably had the best pirate cosplay ever, but not all moments were glamorous. Sometimes, samurai got tangled in their own armor. Ever tried running with metal plates and horns? Not easy. Horses got spooked and ran in the wrong direction, turning an organized charge into a chaotic stampede. Messages got lost, causing friendly fire or accidental retreats, because even the best plans sometimes go sideways. Sieges, ambushes, and surprise attacks beyond the flashy sword duels. Samurai battles involved sieges. Attacking castles was tough. Picture trying to break into a medieval fortress while defenders poured boiling oil on you. Not the most pleasant welcome party. Ambushes. Catching enemies off guard was an art. Samurai often used the landscape, like forests or mountains, to hide and launch surprise attacks. It was basically the original gotcha moment. Night raids, sneaking into enemy camps in the dark, hoping your sword didn't wake the entire army. Spoiler, it often did. Battlefield etiquette. Yes, it's a thing. Even amid chaos, samurai followed strict codes of conduct. Respect your enemy. No sneaky attacks from behind unless you really needed to. Offer your opponent a chance to surrender before delivering the finishing blow, because honor mattered, even in war. Collect the heads of fallen enemies as proof of victory. A bit gruesome, but hey, it was medieval times. Samurai battles were more than just fights. They were moments where strategy, skill, honor, and sometimes sheer luck collided in explosive ways. They remind us that history is messy, unpredictable, and filled with characters who were equal parts hero, legend, and sometimes just a guy who tripped over his own sword. If you think being a samurai was just about flashy armor and epic battles, think again. At the heart of the samurai lifestyle was a strict, sometimes brutal moral compass called Bushido, which means the way of the warrior. It was basically their ancient rulebook for life, love, and how not to look like a total rookie in battle. Bushido. The ultimate samurai rulebook, Bushido, wasn't written on a scroll somewhere. Well, maybe it was, but it was a set of unwritten laws samurai lived and died by. Think of it like an extreme guide to being a good person with swords. The core principles included honor meio, always keep your honor intact, even if that means making some seriously tough decisions. Dying with honor was better than living with shame, which sometimes led to dramatic exits. Hello seppuku, courage, you. Not just physical bravery, but moral courage too, like admitting you messed up your sword technique in front of the whole dojo. Brutal, but honest. Loyalty Chu. Samurai were fiercely loyal to their lord or clan. Betrayal was the ultimate taboo, second only to losing your favorite sword. Respect Rei. Politeness wasn't optional. Even enemies deserved respect, which made post-battle tea ceremonies kind of awkward. Integrity Jie. Do the right thing, even if nobody's watching, or even if it means giving up your last rice ball to a starving peasant. Self-control Jizei. Keep your cool. No sword swinging over spilled sake, no matter how tempting. Honor in death seppuku. If things went south, samurai might choose a very, very formal way out, ritual suicide, to avoid dishonor. Yes, it sounds intense, but it was considered a way to keep dignity intact. Bushido in everyday life. Living by Bushido wasn't just for the battlefield, it shaped everything. How samurai interacted with family, friends and strangers, how they trained, discipline was key, and laziness was a crime, worse than wearing mismatched socks. How they handled success and failure, gracefully accepting victory and swallowing defeat like a bitter pill. The drama of honor was the samurai's currency. Lose it, and you might as well have dropped your sword into a mud puddle. Embarrassing and bad for business. Sometimes this led to epic tales of revenge, loyalty and sacrifice that still inspire movies and books today. Other times, it led to some, let's say, less glamorous moments, like samurai awkwardly bowing and apologizing for accidentally bumping into their lord, the ancient version of "sorry, my bad." Modern echoes of Bushido. Bushido's influence didn't vanish with the samurai era. Its values echo in modern Japanese culture. Think respect for tradition, discipline, and honor. Martial arts around the world, where respect and integrity remain core teachings. Pop culture, from samurai movies to video games, Bushido adds that irresistible flavor of drama and depth. Today, we might not wield katanas or wear lacquered armor, but the spirit of Bushido, honor, courage, loyalty, still resonates. So next time you face a tough decision, remember, what would a samurai do? Probably pause dramatically, then do the right thing, after a quick battle with their own overthinking mind. If you think samurai history is all strict codes and serious battles, buckle up. The world of samurai is also a treasure trove of jaw-dropping legends, tall tales, and myths that have been passed down, and sometimes wildly exaggerated over centuries. When history meets Hollywood, before there were blockbuster samurai movies and manga, there were the oral stories told by campfires and in tea houses, stories designed to inspire, scare, and sometimes entertain the living daylights out of listeners. Some of these stories are absolutely true. Others, well, let's just say they're creative interpretations of history. The tale of Miyamoto Musashi. The sword master extraordinaire Musashi is probably the most famous samurai ever, and his life reads like an action-packed novel. He fought more than 60 duels and never lost a single one. At this point, he might as well have been playing a game on easy mode. Legend says he fought using 2 swords at once. Talk about multitasking on a deadly level. Imagine trying that in your next fencing class. But here's where it gets wild. Some stories say Musashi once won a duel without even fighting. How? By showing up late, so his opponent gave up out of boredom or confusion. Classic ghosting samurai style. Musashi also wrote the Book of 5 Rings, a famous treatise on strategy that's still read by business gurus and martial artists alike. So yes, he was both a killer and a thinker, basically the samurai version of a rockstar philosopher. The ghost stories, samurai who just didn't know when to quit Japanese folklore, is filled with tales of samurai ghosts, loyal warriors who haunt battlefields, castles, or even your local ramen shop if you disrespect the noodles. One famous story tells of a samurai who, after dying in battle, continued to fight as a ghost to protect his lord's honor. Imagine trying to have a quiet afterlife when you're still slicing invisible enemies. These tales weren't just spooky, they were moral lessons wrapped in chilling narratives. Respect the samurai spirit, or else the mysterious Teng, birdmen of the mountains. In the samurai era, Myths about supernatural creatures mingled with real warriors. Tengu were legendary bird-like creatures said to be both protectors and tricksters. They wore red faces, had long noses, and were known to teach swordsmanship to worthy samurai, or mess with their heads if they weren't paying attention. Some samurai claim to have trained under Tengu in secret mountain dojos. Whether that's true or just an excuse for, "I lost because a bird distracted me," remains a mystery. Legendary battles and impossible feats. Many samurai battles became the stuff of legend, with stories that sometimes stretched reality. The Battle of Sekigahara 1600 is often called the greatest samurai showdown ever. It was so big and important that the outcome shaped Japan's future for centuries. Legends say some warriors fought entire armies single-handedly. While probably a slight exaggeration, it does highlight the samurai ideal of bravery and skill beyond human limits. And let's not forget the tales of samurai who supposedly vanished into mist, teleported, or used ninja-level stealth. While historians raise an eyebrow, these stories add that spicy flavor to samurai lore. When myths helped keep the samurai spirit alive, why do these larger-than-life tales persist? They inspired future generations of warriors and ordinary people alike to aspire to courage, honor, and loyalty. They made samurai legends into cultural icons, immortalizing their values in art, theater, and literature. And honestly, they're just really entertaining. Who doesn't love a good story about a ghost samurai or a birdman sword teacher? History buffs try, but with samurai legends, it's like peeling an onion made of mystery and myth. The truth is often wrapped in layers of storytelling, each adding a little more drama or humor. So when you hear a samurai story that sounds too epic to be true, chances are it's at least partially true, or the samurai version of, "I swear, it happened like this."